So discretionary fiscal policy. This is when the government deliberately makes changes in government expenditure and average tax rates to influence equilibrium income. So government expenditure. So first let's talk about the expansionary fiscal policy, where aggregate expenditure is less than the optimal level of output. This means that there exists a deflationary gap, and the policy is counter-deflationary. This means that the government will increase government expenditure. This will lead to a rise in equilibrium income, leading to a rise in by change in government expenditure times the multiplier. So the government will reduce tax rates to disposable income rises, and when disposable income rises, this will lead to a rise in consumption, leading to economic recovery. But the thing is that the entire tax cut will not go into consumption in the form of injection. This will also lead to a rise in withdrawals, say in the form of a rise in savings and a rise in imports. This means that the change in tax rates, this means the fall in tax rates, need to be higher than the change in government expenditure. So to make the expansionary policy effective. On the other hand, if we are at a point where y is greater than y star, this means there needs to be a contractionary fiscal policy that cools down the economy. The government will first reduce government expenditure, leading to a fall in y. This will be times 1 upon withdrawal. Change in government expenditure times 1 upon withdrawal. On the other hand, the government will also increase average tax rates, leading to a fall in disposable income. This will lead to a fall in consumption, but at the same time, this will lead to a fall in withdrawals. And you know what happens when withdrawals fall? The multiplier rises. So this will be because savings will fall and imports will also fall. So the government needs to make sure that the change in tax rates is less than the change in government expenditure to make the contractionary fiscal policy effective. So this was a quick review of how the government makes use of contractionary and expansionary fiscal policy. If we take at the limitations of discretionary fiscal policy, the first one is that if your AE is less than AE star, this means that the government, let me use a different color for this, this means that the government will increase government expenditure, leading to a rise in the demand for money, because the government needs to finance this increase in government expenditure. This means that the LP curve will shift outwards, leading to a rise in interest rates, and when interest rates rise, investment falls. Then costs of production rise. If costs of production rise, exports fall because exports get expensive, and imports rise because domestic goods are now expensive as compared to imported goods, and the overall effect is negative. Then this also leads to hot capital inflow, because a rise in interest rates means that the demand for money, local currency, rise, leading to a rise in the price of local currency, again making exports ineffective in the world market, and local goods cheaper. And local goods expensive and imported goods cheaper, leading to an overall fall in net exports. This will lead to a fall in AE, leading to a fall in equilibrium income. So this means that, say if you're over here and you're moving towards Y star, this crowding out because of a fall in net exports and investment will lead to reduction in equilibrium income. Let's make this reduction a bit smaller. Partially, equilibrium income will partially be reduced. The rise in equilibrium income will partially be reduced by the crowding out effect. So that's one limitation. The other one is that as your economy approaches Y star, factors of production get short because the government increases government expenditure. This means that the government is now competing with private sector for the factors of production, and because it's the government, obviously the government gets all the factors of production and the private sector is left out. This means that investment falls, and when investment falls, this leads to the crowding out effect. So that's another limitation. Another limitation is, say the government makes use of an expansionary policy, but it does not really change government expenditure. Instead, it just reduces the tax rates. The reduction in tax rates will lead to a rise in disposable income, leading to a rise in consumption. This is what's supposed to happen. But since your government expenditure hasn't changed, this means that government expenditure is still constant. But because of a fall in tax rates, your tax revenues have fallen. TY has fallen. This means that the government will now have to borrow, say from the World Bank or IMF, to pay for government expenditure. This means that in future there will be interest payments. And to pay for this interest payment, the government will increase tax rates. And if public expect a rise in the tax rates in the future, they will save, and change in consumption will be zero. They will save, so they are not left with less money, less income, less saved income in the future to protect the purchasing power from falling. So these are the three limitations that I can think of. In the next video, we'll talk about the balanced budget multiplier, and that will be the last video for the topic of fiscal policy.